since birth. Yes, I know my worth. Go hard, put in work, cause I come first, and I ain't even need your help. I put the work in. Put the work in. Put the work in. You gotta do it for yourself. Put the work in. I heard you looking for results.
What's up, everyone? We are introducing a new series this year. It is going to be recap videos from every single tournament I fish. So not only the Elite Series events, but also the Bassmaster Opens, Southern Opens specifically this year, as well as the Bassmaster Classics. So there's going to be a recap for each one of those. These are presented by MidwayUSA, so you can thank them for all of this lovely information. So we'll give a breakdown of what I looked for, how I used my electronics, and then I'll go up front and I'll grab the baits and the techniques that I used and talk about those a little bit so that you guys get a full rundown of kind of how I approached that body of water. So to dive right in, let's talk about location. One of the hard things in Florida is that there's a lack of contour lines, right? When you scroll through, there's just really not a lot of crazy depth changes, right? You've got to travel a long ways horizontal to get any vertical depth change. And so one of the key things that I figured out is that the grass lines oftentimes act as the contour lines for those bass. And it's really about dialing in what type of grass those fish want to be around that week, and then kind of moving with those fish and figuring out, do they want to be in the really thick stuff? Do they want to be in scattered hydrilla? And at the first Open and the Lake Toho Kissimmee Chain, a lot of those better fish I found with the weather being colder than it was, they were in offshore grass. I decided to stay in Toho, target those fish, and I figured out an area actually right in here that was void of contours, but it had grass, and what it had was grass and hard spots mixed in here. And what I did is I just idled around and looked for those. So I'm gonna kind of show you guys a little bit of what type of stuff I was looking for and give you guys a little breakdown there. So do a little idling here for a second, and I'll find some of this kind of offshore grass, right? We're looking for those grass lines. One of the big things is setting up your electronics correctly. And what I like to do is actually run the blue palette for my side imaging. I run it on Mega, and I run it about 115 feet out there. I've got my settings right here, sensitivity on 13, contrast on 11, chart speeds on 5. You can see I've got manual range at 115 feet. And if you look right here, see this grass right here? I'm actually gonna stop this. So one of the beautiful things about Solix, we've got touchscreen, cross-touch technology. This right here is your grass, right? So this is gonna be your scattered hydrilla. And you see how it's real dark. We can scroll back a little bit. See how it's real dark here? And we've got little tiny patches here, and you've got this hard edge that comes in. Notice how it starts to get a little bit brighter here. That means we've got a harder bottom. That's a harder bottom return. And this is where those fish, you know, they may sit out here or they may sit up in this grass depending on the hour of the day. And then they're going to push that bait as those bait fish come along. They'll get up and they'll feed on these little hard spots mixed in with this scattered hydrilla. And you can see as we're starting to drift over some of it, starting to show up on the down imaging. This is color palette number 10. And I run this one. I just feel like it shows the grass really well. You get really good contrast. And I actually run, because we're up shallower and I'm moving a lot, I like to run this in 800 kilohertz on my down imaging for when I'm up shallow. You can see I've got my sensitivity up high. I've got it at 18 and my contrast at 10. It does a good job of showing those scattered smaller stalks of that hydrilla and coontail that gets mixed in there. So just a little quick rundown. Not gonna go into crazy depth and detail on this, but that was how I started out, where I found those fish. Now let's talk about the baits that I use. So I'm gonna hop up there, talk about that a little bit. So Kissimmee Chain, Toho, like I said, fishing offshore grass. I really had a two-prong approach, and it really had to do with moving baits. We had up and down weather that week, and I really put these two rods in my hand and kind of just stuck with them. One being a 3/4 ounce bladed jig. Not even sure on this color. This is actually one that I had bought in Japan. And then I've added a 5.5 inch X-Zone Mega Swammer to that. And I cut a little bit of the head of that bait off. So flip that back, you can see I square up that head. And what that does is that adds more bulk, and it gives that skirt a little bit more flare. And I would pitch this bait out there, and I just kind of slow wind it through that grass and kind of pump it, and it just, you know, just vibrate up, and then I'd let it fall. And that bigger piece of plastic does a good job of kind of slowing that fall down, but keeping that 3/4 helps keep it down there. And then you get a ton of action out of that Mega Swammer. So that was kind of my go-to bait, throwing it on 15-pound Seagar Tatsu. I like a little bit of stretch in that when I'm throwing this bait. It really allows those fish to suck it in, especially when you get a cold front. And then throwing it on the Alpha Angler Rebound, 100% glass rod, 7-foot, medium heavy. So it's got a super sensitive tip. It allows those fish to really suck that bait in, and then I'm able to crack them and allow the rod to do the work, right? It's got a real even parabolic bend that I like to throw. Actually the same rod that I throw for my crankbaits as well. And then actually fishing it this week on the new Daiwa Zillion SV TW, throwing it in a 7.1 to 1. Slow enough that I can keep that bait down there, tick the bottom, but then fast enough that when a fish eats it and pushes it forward, I can get a couple quick cranks in and load the rod up on those fish. And then the next one that we were targeting is actually, I would see little groups of these fish on my Mega 360, and I could scan over and I would see them on Mega Live sometimes. And I was targeting those fish with a jerkbait. So this is a little Rapala shadow wrap in the shallower version in moss back shiner, probably my favorite color. And then throwing that on the Alpha Angler Slasher, right? Slashing. And that is a 610 medium action jerkbait rod, light tip, but locks in. It's a little bit faster than the Rebound, still has a lot of good bend to help keep those fish pegged on the treble hooks, but light enough tip that we've got that good action, right? It allows a lot of slack in that bait. And then I like throwing my jerkbaits on a smaller reel. So this is actually a Daiwa Tatula SVTW in the 70 size. So I have kind of average medium sized hands, but what I've noticed is that when I'm palming this reel, right, I got all 4 fingers in front of the reel, I palm this reel and it gives me full control. My hand doesn't want to cramp up. It sits in there nice and relaxed, and having that control with your jerkbait is super important, because I would have to change my retrieve several times throughout the day depending on how those fish were reacting. Not our best week, but also not our worst week in Florida. Finished up 53rd. I'll take it. Decent start to the year, right? Just came down to decisions. I didn't stick it out in that area as long as I probably should have. A couple other guys had some top 20s out of that area. So good week. First recap video of the year, but make sure you guys subscribe, stay tuned, and show Midway USA a little love for bringing these recap videos to you.
Say, hey, I've been on the wave. It's a party, make a toast. It's a party every day.